What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and today we got a good one. We are going to do my first crack at a 2024 Dynasty Rookie Superflex mock draft. I'm going to go through essentially my top 12 or so picks here, break them down into tiers, and just do, I know we've done a preview of the class before this season, but now that we have their year 3 and 4 stats or their final year stats, we can kind of go through what these players look like after their final year of college and really break down where I'm at with the high end of this class, especially because last year, everyone knows what's going on with Bijan Robinson, right? I really didn't talk much about Bijan. So it's nice now to do a video like this and we can really focus in on those blue chip guys. I did really deep dives into Caleb Williams and Drake Maye and all these guys, because as the season goes on, we're going to definitely dig deeper and deeper and deeper. So this is kind of a nice overview of the top of these classes. I know a lot of us have rookie picks. I actually had somebody in the Discord come out and say, Ron, I have my 101 through 106. Where should my head be at? So this is a good way of just sort of showing you guys, if you have a ton of rookie picks, just kind of what to expect and what this 2024 class is shaping up to be. So with all that being said, we're going to go through, I think, my top 15 picks in Dynasty Rookie Superflex if we had a rookie draft today. Now, a lot can happen. Declares, injuries in bowl games. You would hate to see that, but a lot of things can change, testing, combine numbers, all of that. So just a little bit of a disclaimer, but this is just where I'm at today, December 15th. So with all that being said, we had a lot to get into. So as always, enjoy, leave a like, subscribe. Let's go.
VVS stones, like this froze, ice cold, ice around my body like I'm frozen, she gon' let me.
All right, get me in the tier list. We have the 101, so this is just 101 tier. Guys that I'd be willing to spend my 101 on. We have early first, this is just not somebody I'd spend 101 on, but a top 5 pick. Middle first, I think that's pretty self-explanatory, somewhere around, 106, 109 territory, and then late first. These guys are on the fringes of your, 110 to 202 area. So with that being said, at the 101, we're going to select Caleb Williams, quarterback out of USC. He is my QB1. And I do want to say, all of these 101 guys are guys we know are going to go high in the NFL draft. Caleb Williams right now, this is the consensus big board. He's number 2 there. My guess is he goes first overall. Now, we've had some fatigue with Caleb Williams, right? Where I see a lot. Now, I'm curious because I don't think the Dynasty community has soured on Caleb Williams as much as the NFL draft community has. The NFL draft community absolutely hates Caleb Williams because he paints his nails. He had an awful, I wouldn't even call it awful. That's the funniest part about Caleb Williams. He had a down final year. His final year, his third year, was maybe his worst year or a year about parallel with what his freshman year was over at Oklahoma. He was 5-star, went to Oklahoma. He unseats Spencer Rattler, transfers to USC, balls out his second year Heisman. He's been great across the board. Now, when we look at just these are just stock stats here in terms of what we can sort of see with Caleb Williams here. You can just see, what are we nitpicking here? This is above 9 yards per attempt every single year as a freshman. 21 touchdowns, 4 picks. Sophomore, 42 touchdowns, 5 picks. Last year, 30 touchdowns, 5 picks. He's not turning the ball over a ton when it comes to interceptions. Over 9 yards per attempt is amazing. Almost over 65% completion percentage every single year. And the big thing is that he's a threat on the ground, right? We're in that first year. I think his first game he came in at Oklahoma for Spencer Rattler, you can see a long run of 74 yards. He had a 74-yard run. I think that was against Texas. I think that was the Red River shootout or whatever they call it. Then after that, 10 rushing touchdowns, 11 rushing touchdowns. This is a guy in his last 2 years has had over 40 total touchdowns, 5 or less picks. What are we talking about here? Now, in terms of that sustained excellence, I truly do think, I know that people are going to say, oh, that's hyperbole. People are getting out over their skis. Caleb Williams, we've been talking about this guy. We do are, looking forward to 2024. We might do a 2025 rookie video probably, I don't know, probably before the combine, but after the NFL fantasy season. But with Caleb Williams, we've talked about him since his freshman year. That's a crazy freshman year to come in there right off the bat, 9 yards per attempt, 21 touchdowns, 4 picks, and it was less games than the other one too. So that's also why those stats are lower, but those are amazing stats for a freshman to come in and have. And on top of that, when we look at my database here, he actually, do I not have this database pulled up? Or I do? Yeah, here it is. So I look at QBR when it comes to quarterbacks, right? And QBR is just quarterback rating by ESPN. It just takes into account every single play. It's one of the things I found to be more predictive when it comes to QBs. Now, it's not your normal quarterback rating of like 158.3 is perfect. It's a scale, I think like 0 to, I think you can go all the way, I don't know what the max number is, but it's a lower number. I found it to be more statistically significant than like your classic rating. And this is a list of players who, over their entire career, they have never gone under an 80 QBR, and they have 3 seasons or more of 80-plus QBR. You get a 5-man list of Caleb Williams, Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Watson, Mariota, and Andrew Luck. That is a rare list to be a part of where every single year you played, you never dipped under 80. So you always had the same standard, and you were good throughout your entire career. 80-plus, to me, is an elite QBR grade. If you can sustain that over 3 years and never dip under that, that's impressive. And the only guys on this list to go first overall, Andrew Luck, Trevor Lawrence. If Caleb Williams goes first overall, he then joins them 80-plus every year, 3 or more years, no season below 80-plus QBR. So to me, if he goes first overall and the NFL says, hey, the painting the nails, the sobbing on the sideline or whatever, if he goes first overall, none of that stuff matters to me. Now, if he somehow slips, like let's say he goes, I don't know, let's say he goes like 7th, 8th, 9th overall because he's being awful in interviews and stuff, then we can address that down the road. I know that some people are like really concerned about, I know that he came out and was like, I want equity in whatever team I get drafted to. I think a lot of it's blown out of proportion, to be honest. The painting the nails is a little bit weird, but it seems like he doesn't do it as much anymore. I don't know. These players, they're different these days. Again, I think the draft capital will dictate that, and if he goes first overall, to me, he is the next Andrew Luck, Trevor Lawrence, etc. And I think he can run better than those guys. We saw the stats, 10-plus rushing touchdowns each of the last 2 years. Now, I also want to say the reason why he's been so, like this last year was tough for him because USC was just not a good team. Like if we look here, this is just wild, fellas. This is your worst defenses in college football. Whoever, the defenses that give up the most points per game in football. There's barely any Power 5 teams on this list. USC give up 34.9 points per game. That is on par with New Mexico, South Florida, Temple, Southern Mississippi, Vanderbilt. Like this is a Vanderbilt level defense he was playing with. So a lot of the bad plays that he might have made, or if he threw more interceptions, or he had a lot more turnover-worthy plays on PFF, in my eyes, he's playing hero ball. Every game he's trying to come from behind in a stacked, this is the most stacked the Pac-12 has been in a while, where, Washington, Oregon, Utah was really good this year. Oregon State was really good this year. So you put yourself in a spot where it's like, man, your defense is giving up 35 every game in a Power 5 conference. Like that is really tough. It's a tough hole to dig yourself out of. And on top of that, his offensive line went from the 3rd best pass block efficiency offensive line. It's a PFF metric that kind of measures your offensive line and how much you let in pressure. They were 3rd in 2022 in the Pac-12. Then they went down to 8th. There's like 12-ish teams in the Pac-12. To go from 3rd to 8th means your offensive line took a step back. Your defense was Big 12 level. Like it's just an awful situation to play in and like play good football. He's constantly under pressure, under duress, and then usually trailing in a game. So he has to throw. He has to get some arm punts out there. And even then, his stats look great. Now, the one big red flag, the nails stuff and the personality stuff, I don't know the dude personally. If he goes first overall, I could honestly care less about all of that. But the one thing you can point to with Caleb Williams is the sacks. That's really the biggest thing. And I will say the other big thing is that he had a down final year. But I did want to point out some of the best quarterback prospects have had a down final year. Justin Herbert had a down final year. Caleb Williams, and even his down final year, 82.3 QBRs, not that bad. But you can see Trevor Lawrence, his best year was his second year. Deshaun Watson had his worst year in his final year. Andrew Luck had a down year. Like he had a massive age 21 season. Then age 22 came all the way down to 83.8. So it's really not, like you're not going to get this linear, like not everyone can be Joe Burrow where it's super linear. Justin Herbert was this way as well, where he had a great second year and then his 3rd and 4th weren't all that great. I just don't care. Again, 82.3 is still amazing for his final year. Was it a down year compared to year 2? Yes, but that honestly just happens in college football. Now, when we talk about Caleb Williams, the biggest red flag that to me is an actual red flag is his sacks. Now, this is a really cool chart from F-Ball Insights on Twitter. And you can see sack rate and you can see time to throw. And he is somebody in college football that has one of the highest time to throws, or actually the highest career time to throw in all of college football since 2014. So he holds on to the ball a while. He is your Russell Wilson. He is your Justin Fields, where he's going to hold on to the ball a ton. Now, the thing that bails him out ever so slightly here is you can see it's also on sack rate, right? So his sack rate is actually in line with guys who don't hold on to the ball as much. Like his sack rate is in line with a guy like Drake Maye, where it's sub 7%. Where you can see Justin Fields holds on to the ball a ton, but he's somewhere in that 7.5%. Lamar Jackson as well, in terms of like where they are lower wise on your y-axis. Same with like Sam Howell, and he doesn't even hold the ball a ton. So Caleb Williams is really good at evading pressure, creating things, but he invites a lot of it, if that makes sense. He holds on to the ball for a while, but that's because the pocket's breaking down, it's collapsing. He's trying to find something. He's one of the best. I'm not a film guy, right? We're going to go through pretty much numbers here, but just from watching Caleb Williams, he does some of the craziest out of structure plays, and the arm talent's amazing. He can just throw it wherever the hell he wants. He has like moon ball. Like he had like this one moon ball down the sideline against UCLA, constantly making plays, constantly evading sacks. Like it's kind of all part of the experience, but you can see here, it would be a lot worse if he was like, parallel to Sam Howell, right? And he's taking, like a 9% sack rate. Him being right in that 6.5% range, it's not amazing, but it's not hindering him as a prospect, if that makes sense. You would prefer him to be above that x-axis kind of dotted line, in that Anthony Richardson, Mahomes area, but it's tough. Those guys are special players. Now, in terms of inviting that pressure, again, this kind of illustrates that from Austin Gale here. Hope I'm saying that right. I don't know if I think it's Gale. Per PFF, Caleb Williams ranked 102nd in passing grade versus pressure and 4th in the same stat when not pressured. Williams, not the offensive line, has also been charged with 40% of pressures allowed, the highest of any QB in the FBS by a wide margin. So he does invite pressure, he holds on to the ball, but he does make plays out of structure. Now, it's also important to note that this year, he had 10 big-time throws to 16 turnover-worthy plays on pressure dropbacks. He had 17 big-time throws to 2 turnover-worthy plays when kept clean. So he's much better in a clean pocket, but his Heisman season, he was actually amazing under pressure. So I think that it is a little bit of an offensive line thing where his Heisman year, he had 14 big-time throws to 4 turnover-worthy plays. Now, again, this year, he had 10 big-time throws to 16 turnover-worthy plays. The year before that, he had 14 big-time throws to just 4 turnover-worthy plays. Like literally 25% of the turnover-worthy plays and almost 50% more big-time throws when under pressure on PFF. So I think it was just a down year. I think it was a bad offensive line. Again, he's playing a lot of hero ball with that defensive line. To me, it's a little bit of a blemish, but it's also kind of his play style. He does hold on to the ball. He does his best work out of structure. So I think it's a slight red flag, how long he holds onto the ball and how much he takes sacks, but he's at least good at evading pressure, where he does invite sacks, but his sack rate is low for as much as he holds on to the ball. He should get sacked way more than he does for as long as he holds on to the ball. So it's a give and take with him. I don't think that it's crippling to the point where he can't be a successful NFL quarterback because of that, but it is probably the one red flag that you want to write down for Caleb Williams. Now, after that, we have our 102 here. We have Marvin Harrison Jr. Now, I did just realize, we are 13 minutes into this video, and I only talked about Caleb Williams. But I told you guys, we're going to go as deep as we can possibly go on these blue chip guys, because in March, these aren't the guys we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about, who can we take in the second round, and, what are we doing in the late first? Like, these guys are sort of no-brainers, no doubters up top here. Then we have Marvin Harrison Jr. He is in my eyes, he is in the same bucket as a Jamar Chase. He is the best wide receiver prospect since Jamar Chase. He is in that air of Jamar Chase. We have the RS grades here where you can see this is the bucket he's in right now. He is a legendary wide receiver prospect, and these are all the legendary wide receiver prospects to go top 10 since 2007. It is Jamar Chase, Calvin Johnson, Julio Jones, AJ Green. His worst case scenarios would be Amari Cooper and Sammy Watkins. Those guys are both studs that just didn't really quite pan out. I think Marvin Harrison Jr., the closest comp he has in this group is AJ Green, just as his size. He's like 6'4", 6'3". He's listed as 6'3" some places, 6'4" in the other, but just being that like long, athletic playmaker, really good at the catch point, really good in terms of running routes. He's just amazing across the board. I will also say, so legendary tier, I do want to explain the prospect tier thing. I know a lot of you guys are maybe new, but I have the RS grades. It's my prospect model for of course prospects, but I have tiers, right, where you get a certain RS grade, which just takes into account your production, your athleticism, your age, all of that, and it spits out a grade. Now, I break them up into tiers based on your number grade. The top, you have legendary. Those guys hit top 24 seasons 100% of the time, average 16.4 points per game through their first 3 seasons. Then you have elite. gold, silver, bronze. So legendary is a rare air. There's only been 8 since 2007 to be a legendary wide receiver prospect. Marvin Harrison Jr. is on that track. Now, I also want to say one of the big metrics I use for wide receivers is going to be receiving yards per team pass attempt. So that's just receiving yards divided by team pass attempt. It's just pretty much, it's a way of almost combining like targets per route run and yards per route run without getting per route data, where it's just, how much of the offense are you commanding and how efficient are you? So it's kind of like, it's volume and efficiency combined into one metric. And what's really impressive here, when you put him next to the Ohio State guys of, JSN, Olave, and Garrett Wilson, the 3 guys that are like, top 20 dynasty wide receivers. They've come out in the last few years. They're all in the same wide receiver room. Marvin Harrison Jr., of course, was buried on this depth chart in year 1, but he's the only guy of this list with 2 individual seasons of 3 or more receiving yards per team pass attempt, and they're both equally impressive to me. The first one he did next to, I think he did it next to JSN and Emeka Egbuka, 2 guys who are first-round wide receiver talents. And then in year 3, he did it on his own with Kyle McCord at quarterback. So he had CJ Stroud before, and then he did it with Kyle McCord. Kyle McCord, he's not a scrub, but he's not CJ Stroud is what I'm trying to say here. And on top of that, he's next to your 5-star guys. I'm trying to think of who. It's not Jeremiah Smith. He's coming out next year, but Ohio State has another guy, and it's not Bond. Damn it. They got another guy who's coming up right now who's like really good. Of course, they have Emeka Egbuka. Of course, they have the tight end Stover. They have so many weapons in that offense, and it's not a good offense. So to still get 3+ yards per out run and an offense where your quarterback is Kyle McCord, that's amazing. So again, 2 over that threshold of like what you want for top 24 seasons, amazing. So production's there, pedigree's there, where he was like a 4-star coming out. His dad is Marvin Harrison. It's all there. He is, again, to me, he is your Jamar Chase, Julio Jones, AJ Green. He is 100% in that tier, in that, rare air, if you will. Now, after that, we have Drake Maye, who is also really fun and has some pedigree himself. This is someone like nobody cares about this, and you shouldn't care about this, but he is the younger brother of Luke Maye, UNC basketball legend. I think that they won a championship. I think he hit some big shots as well. So that just tells me that he's an athlete, right? Or his brother, basketball player. I imagine that Drake Maye played basketball growing up. He can move. He's an athlete. Shows up in terms of his rushing stats. But when we talk about him, he actually has a similar issue to Caleb Williams, where he also takes sacks. Like, the thing that was so good about Anthony Richardson last year is he was very good at evading pressure, not taking bad sacks. And that was one of the reasons we were high on him, even though the passing stats weren't there. But on the opposite side of this, Maye and Caleb Williams do definitely take sacks, and they're not great sacks, but they're also not debilitating compared to what else they bring to the table, where, Anthony Richardson didn't have above a 60% completion percentage or whatever in college. Well, Maye and Caleb Williams have like 2+ years of just like video game passing stat numbers. Now, when we look at this chart, I think this is again from this is from somebody else. This is from College Football Numbers on Twitter here. But this is also an interesting chart where x-axis is rate of charges, pressure to quarterback. So, what pressures are you responsible for? And I think that just means holding onto the ball for a while. Maybe, it's a clean pocket, and then like 3 seconds tick by, and now the sack is kind of on your plate, or you run into a sack, whatever. You can see Caleb Williams and Drake Maye at this point in the year, in the 2023 season, were both like almost in a league of their own in terms of rate of pressures charged to the quarterback. But the interesting part is they're not taking they're inviting pressure, but they're evading it. That's what's so interesting about these guys. You can see the pressure to sack rate. So the rate of pressure is charged to the quarterback, boom. Any pressure that they face is usually their fault. But in turn, they're good at evading it and making plays with their athleticism, where you can see in terms of pressure to sack rate, they are flirting with that 20% range. I think at the end of the year, they're actually under 20%. So as much as pressures they invite, being under a 20% pressure to sack rate means that they're very good at evading the pressure they invite. They make plays down the field. Now, I will say, again, I'm not a huge film guy, but Maye to me seems like a guy who's much more, he's much better in structure and more of like your prototypical QB in terms of just a guy, like almost like a Herbert in a way, but I think that he actually has more scrambling upside than a Herbert, but somebody who can create and is good at evading pressure and everything, but someone that can just play in a normal pro-style offense, not hold on to the ball too long, get the ball out, get it to where it needs to be. He has a rocket arm. He has all of the intangibles as well. We look at his passing stats, like that's really what sticks out here. We have 2 years of 90+ PFF grade. Now, 24 touchdowns, 9 picks in this final year feels bad, and it feels like an off year, But I think that it was just kind of some regression there where he has 34 big time throws to 10 turnover-worthy plays. He has now in the last 2 years led the nation in big time throws. So big time throws, 11-yard ADOT this year, 10.4 ADOT the year before that, over 63% completion on those crazy ADOTs. He's pushing the ball downfield. He's, making big-time throws. He got his turnover-worthy play percentage actually down. Even though he threw more picks, his turnover-worthy play percentage actually went down to 1.9%. I mean, those are just ridiculous passing stats he's had the last 2 years. And the thing that's really exciting about him, he's like 6'4", 6'5", 230 pounds, big arm. Again, brother of Luke Maye. And the thing about him is that he can scramble. I will also say on his deep passes as well, he's really good, where on PFF, he has the third best passing grade on passes of 20 or more yards. He has 13 touchdowns to 4 interceptions on those passes, so he can air it out. He has a big arm. He has really good size. He's a prototypical quarterback, and he can also rush. And he's not just like a pedestrian rusher. Like, he is a real deal rusher of the football. This is rushing EPA, so just expected points added, and it gives you a little bit more weight of like, touchdowns and first downs, and it's not just like yards or anything. But in terms of rush EPA, total rush EPA, he is up there with your Jalen Milroe and your Jayden Daniels, like two guys that are, on paper, much better athletes than a guy like Drake Maye, if that makes sense. But he's great at rushing the ball. He's been top 5 in rush EPA the last 2 years. He's also been top 5 in scrambles, where he actually led the nation with 76 scrambles in 2022. This past year, he was 4th with 51 scrambles. So these aren't designed runs. These are just him bailing on a pocket, getting out in space, and running. So he runs the ball a lot, and it actually qualifies him for elite Konami QB status, which is really exciting. Everybody on this list are guys that you want to have. It is Lamar Jackson, Robert Griffin III, Anthony Richardson, Deshaun Watson. Trey Lance is like your biggest miss on this entire list. You have Mariota, Josh Allen, Mahomes, Justin Fields. Really good company to be in. And when we sort their average rushing yard market share, so just, Drake Maye, the average of 32.54 and 18.99%. So that's just the market share of rushing yards he has within that offense. Now, it's important to note sacks count, so numbers can get sort of screwed when you take a lot of sacks. But he, in terms of average rushing yard market share of all the elite Konami Code QBs, he is, with Lamar, RG3, and Anthony Richardson being the only guys with a 25% or better average. So he can run the ball. I don't think that he's quite Robert Griffin III or Lamar Jackson as an athlete, but I don't think it's that far off to call him in the range of like your Deshaun, Josh Allen, Mahomes area of mobile quarterbacks. And to me, that's really exciting. I think Drake Maye has like the highest floor probably among the QBs in this class. I really like him though. I don't know if anyone's going to sleep on him. It wouldn't shock me if he went first overall. Drake Maye, like, that's why I know it's 101, but I think all of these guys are like transcendent type prospects. Like, I know that Stroud's been great and everything, but I think I would have taken Stroud or Maye like as like my first overall guy a year ago in that class. He's that good. Now, this is where we move on to our early first tier. Again, these are guys that I would take with like a top 5 pick in a Dynasty rookie draft, guys that, I don't know, could maybe work their way into 101, but probably not. I don't really want to spend a 101 on these guys here. But first up at the 104, out of LSU, we have Heisman winners Jayden Daniels. Now, Jayden Daniels, right, of that same list with those elite Konami Code QBs, as of right now, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I'm just going to be straight up. The RS grades absolutely love Jayden Daniels. If Jayden Daniels didn't go, usually you need to go 12th overall or better to get to be an elite quarterback prospect. I think he's like Lamar Jackson in that if he just goes first round, he'll be an elite quarterback prospect, elite Konami, like Lamar Jackson was. So that's really exciting with Jayden Daniels. Now, when you look at Jayden Daniels, he put up one of the craziest seasons. I don't know what it is. Like, I know when Lamar did it, he just had like a certain, I think with Lamar too, of course, at the high school Vine clip and then the free Kodak stuff was like massive. He just had like a bigger pull. Like, Jayden Daniels has been balling out, but I feel like he hasn't been getting as much respect from like media and like social media altogether. Like, I haven't seen many Jayden Daniel highlights despite like a monstrous season here where if we look, do I have these stats on me? I do. If we look at the all-time QBR, so we just talked about having 80+ every single year, and we showed Caleb Williams and those other quarterbacks. Well, when we look at Jayden Daniels, he has the second best QBR season ever. Now, I know Mac Jones is at number 1. You guys will be like, well, who cares? Well, first of all, Mac Jones was a quarterback picked like, top 15 in the NFL? everybody on this list was picked highly besides Russell Wilson and, like, I guess you could consider Mac Jones. But it's a great list to be a part of just in terms of projecting draft capital and projecting success in the NFL. Where you have Mac Jones, you have Kyler, Joe Burrow, Tua, Russell Wilson, Andrew Luck, Tua, Baker Mayfield, Justin Fields. To me, that's a great list to be a part of. I think outside of, I think Russell Wilson and Mac Jones are the only guys who didn't go top 12. There's multiple first rounders on here. There's multiple fantasy stud QBs in this list. It's a great list to be a part of that he's on. So that's just like how amazing his season was. Like, again, to me, he reminds me a lot of Lamar Jackson as a prospect here, just in terms of like kind of what he did in his final year, this like Heisman win. He's also a little bit undersized and he's frail, kind of like Lamar Jackson. He's 6'4", 210 pounds. So he's like very wiry, I guess you could call him. I think that that's going to be a problem for some scouts where he's like maybe too thin. I think people are also going to say that, well, he's a fifth-year guy. He's like 23 years old. I will say, though, I've tested age with quarterbacks, and it hasn't seemed to matter a ton. Andrew Luck, Herbert, Burrow, Cam Newton were all like 23-year-old rookies or older. I haven't found much correlation. It's honestly the only position I don't take into account their age in the model. So it's not really a huge input for me. And then on top of that, he is one of 4 quarterbacks drafted in the first round since 2007 where his average rushing yard market share over his entire career was above 30%. The guys on that list, Lamar Jackson, Cam Newton, Johnny Manziel. Of course, Johnny Manziel is tough, but I think Johnny Manziel and Jayden Daniels, we can be pretty certain that Jayden Daniels is like a real athlete. Where Johnny Manziel is kind of that archetype of white guy that scrambled a ton in college and then got to the NFL and they're not that athletic. So like Manziel and Baker Mayfield. I think we can confidently say Jayden Daniels isn't in that ballpark. I think that his athleticism will translate. I don't think that he's going to be quite the rusher that like Lamar and Cam were in the NFL, but I would say like a step below that in your, of course, like RG3, Kyler Murray range of outcomes here. Now, the interesting part is that he's not like Anthony Richardson. We were so excited because he could rush the ball and was like this like massive specimen and was like a crazy rusher of the football. But there were a lot of question marks, right? Like 55% completion percentage, the passing looked off. Now, tape might tell a different story, but Jayden Daniels as a passer almost reminds me of like RG3 and Kyler Murray as guys that ran the ball a ton, but then also could go toe-to-toe with your Maye and Williams in terms of passing the ball. And you can see here, this is just a graphic from his Heisman night, but he was first in the FBS in completion percentage on passes of 20 or more yards downfield. First in the FBS, 22 touchdowns, 0 picks on those passes, 25.3 yards per attempt on those passes, first in the FBS, all of them best in 10 seasons. Or no, completion percentage and touchdown to interception were best in the last 10 seasons. So just really wild stuff here. We can see here as well, this is just like your top draft guys sorted by yards, and he is above both Caleb Williams and Drake Maye. Better completion percentage, better yards per attempt, more touchdowns, less picks. Now, his big-time throw to turnover-worthy play also checks out. 29 big-time throws to 7 turnover-worthy plays is absolutely amazing. It's actually better than what Caleb Williams did this season. Now, again, I'm not going to put him ahead of those guys. I think that there's just more question marks in terms of like what will really transfer here. I think it's also important to really note like how the scouts and the film evaluators see him, and it's pretty obvious at this point that he's seen in a tier below. And I'm fine to kind of ride with that at this point, where you have Caleb Williams and Drake Maye locks for top 3 in my eyes or top 5 in my eyes. Jayden Daniels at 8, but if he fell out of the top 12, it wouldn't be the most shocking thing in the world for like, I don't know, for teams to like fall out of love with Jayden Daniels by the end of this. I don't think that they should, but it wouldn't shock me. Now, he likely qualifies as an elite Konami code QB if he goes anywhere in the first round. So to me, he will be a priority for me in the top 5 regardless, just because I chase that archetype often. Now, I will say, one of the knocks you can have for Jayden Daniels is he did have 2 NFL caliber wide receivers, one being Brian Thomas Jr. we'll talk about, and the other being Malik Nabers. Now, I will also say, though, a lot of other quarterbacks have had a lot of NFL talent on their teams. We saw Joe Burrow with Chase Jefferson. We also saw Kyler Murray with CeeDee Lamb and Hollywood Brown. You see it a lot. I don't think that it's really the end of the world that he had a really good supporting cast, but it's maybe a reason that you could be like, well, these stats are a little crazy. I mean, C.J. Stroud as well. C.J. Stroud had what? Marvin Harrison Jr., JSN, Emeka Egbuka, one of the best wide receiver rooms ever. So I don't know. If you want to make that a knock against him, you definitely can, but I think it's tough. Now, with Malik Nabers, I'll be honest, I looked past him. I didn't really, like his year 1 and year 2 stats were fine, but they weren't all that exciting. Like I kind of didn't have him in this tier just like in my head after doing the grades last offseason, but after inputting his year 3 stats, what he did this year, absolutely bonkers. And I think it's no exaggeration. I tweeted something out earlier today. Marvin Harrison Jr., to me, no contest wide receiver 1 in this class. But Malik Nabers, to me, alongside Marvin Harrison Jr., are both the best wide receiver prospects we've seen since Ja'Marr Chase. Malik Nabers is that good. I cannot stress that enough. He is that good. Malik Nabers, to me, better prospect than Garrett Wilson, Drake London, all of those guys. When we look at what he did at LSU this past year, just absolutely bonkers. He's the only guy. I put all the LSU guys on there because why not? But among Jarvis, Odell Beckham, Justin Jefferson, Ja'Marr Chase, he is the only guy on this entire list to hit a 4+ receiving yards per team pass attempt season. To hit a 4+ receiving yards per pass attempt season in the SEC next to another first-round wide receiver in Brian Thomas Jr., that is insane. Again, he's the only guy on this list to even sniff 4, and he got above 4 receiving yards per team pass attempt. And on top of that, the thing that really sticks out to me is how young he is. This is experience adjusted. If we adjust this for age, it looks even more bonkers, where that's like year 1, year 2, year 3. This is a guy who is 20 years old. He is not going to be 21 until July 8th of 2024. That is insane. On draft night, he will be 20 years old. He put up this season at 20. He put up 86 catches, 1,546 yards, 14 touchdowns at age 20. That is bonkers. He is somebody that Marvin Harrison Jr. is like pretty much no doubter to be legendary. Malik Nabers has a path to be legendary. If he goes top 10 and he tests well at the combine, which I expect him to, I think he has like an unofficial 4.4 in his past. I don't know. Like those are always tough to sort of gauge, but if he hits my relative athletic score multiplier for just like getting drafted for just like running a good 40, I think he's going to be a legendary wide receiver prospect as well. So Malik Nabers is somebody I am very, very excited for. Do not sleep on him. I cannot stress enough. Marvin Harrison Jr., S tier, GOAT tier, crown jewel of this class. But Malik Nabers is no consolation prize at wide receiver too. I think to me, they're almost like 1A, 1B, and then it's a big tier break to that next group of wide receivers. Now, moving on from that, we have our mid-first. These are guys that I would take around the 106. And first up, and I will say a lot of these guys are going to kind of come down to how you value positional value and also draft capital uncertainty. And draft capital uncertainty is why I'm going to put this guy at my 106 here. I feel like I haven't been making the picks, but 101 Caleb Williams, 102 Marvin Harrison Jr., 103 Drake Maye, 104 Jayden Daniels, 105 Malik Nabers, 106 Brock Bowers. For all of the audio listeners out there, why not? But when we look again at that draft list, Brock Bowers right now is the number 7 consensus player. He's, to me, a lock to go top 12 at worst. That's absolute worst to me with Brock Bowers. So I like this far out because players can fall out of the first round. You really don't know what's going to happen. Anthony Richardson was like a fringe first, second round pick this time last year. But when we look at Brock Bowers, I think there's going to be some Kyle Pitts bias, right? A lot of us got burned on Kyle Pitts. I'm not taking a tight end high anymore. I'll wait and I'll snag my Sam Laporta in the second round again. Well, here's the issue. There's not really a lot of opportunities for a Sam Laporta. We've seen guys like Irv Smith suck. We've seen guys like Noah Fant flame out. It's tough. I mean, tight ends are tough to sort of gauge, but it's rare you get a guy as special as Brock Bowers. Like Brock, I genuinely can't explain how insane he is. Now, he's perfect for fantasy. He's a little bit undersized. He's like 6'4", 230 pounds. He's somewhere in that Evan Ingram tree of move tight ends, but I've been told from a lot of film guys that he can block really well as well. So he's somewhere between like Evan Ingram and George Kittle. I think George Kittle is like a really good, super, super high-end comp. I don't know if he'll ever get to be the blocker that George Kittle was, but Bowers, in terms of his production in college, is just absolutely insane. He's 6'4", 230 pounds, like I said. And like when you just look at what he did in school, it is absolutely absurd here, where we have experience-adjusted PPR points per game. By the way, all these charts I use with like the big C in the corner, top right corner, this is Campus to Canton, where they just have all of these stats for you, which is amazing. We look at PPR points per game. So this is like, touchdowns, catches, receiving yards. These are all of the best tight end prospects of the last 10 or so years. Gronkowski, obviously amazing stud in the NFL. Kyle Pitts goes top 5. Eric Ebron went, I think, like top 15. I think TJ Hawkinson went like 8th overall. And then Sam Laporta is having one of the best rookie seasons of all time this year. And you can see among this star-studded group, Bowers first and far away first in points per game in his first year. Second among this group in year 2. second among this group in year 3. So he is routinely at the top of this list. He's very, very good. And what really excites me about this, I know that some people are going to be like, Ron, why the hell does this matter? But I think it does. I think it just shows how dynamic he is. Look at these rushing stats, man. On top of that, he has a career 14.5 receiving yards per catch. So he's making big plays when he touches the ball. He's not your possession Jason Witten guy. He's making big plays. And then the rushing, man. He has 19 career rushes for 193 yards and 5 touchdowns. Averaging over 10 yards per carry with 5 touchdowns on 19 carries is huge. Like, even just being trusted in an offense to take carries in the SEC and, like, not be a complete zero there as a tight end is massive. Like, he can do he is a true, like, I know that coaches throw around, like, weapon, joker. He is that guy. He can line up and play slot receiver. He can line up inside. He can play H-back. You can give him a carry if you want. You can do whatever you want with Brock Bowers. I think that there's going to be somebody out there, hopefully not Arthur Smith, who picks up Brock Bowers and uses him to the best of his abilities. Well, also, look, fellas, I mean, it's tough. I don't know how much you want to really give weight to these numbers, but he did run in college 4.55 40. That would be amazing. 40 inch vertical. I will say, I feel like a vertical is tougher to fib. You know what I mean? Like, you can't really fake a vertical. Like, it's pretty, like, they measure your height, they set it up, and you do it. Like, there's no hand time. 40 inch vertical is absurd. So that's really cool. And 215 pounds, I think that he's put on a lot of weight since then, which is really good for him. And then another stat from Football Insights here. These are Power 5 players over the last 5 draft classes, averaging 2 or more yards per route run and 0.48 first downs per target in college with over 200 targets. It is a list of Harrison Jr., Nabers, Garrett Wilson, Olave, Devontae Smith. Isaiah Hodgins is the one that's not great. Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, T. Higgins, and then Brock Bowers, the only tight end on there. Insane. He is very, very, very good. I know that we say this every time, but I think that he's honestly a better prospect than Kyle Pitts was. I really do. But again, I think the NFL and fantasy are going to have some bias to what happened with Kyle Pitts, and they're not going to want to take Bowers as high in both formats. Now, after that, we have a pair of wide receivers here. We have Keon Coleman, and we have Rome Odunze. I like Rome Odunze at wide receiver 3. I have Keon Coleman at wide receiver 4, my 107, 108. This is kind of what it comes down to. I'm not in love with either prospect, if I'm being honest with you. But when we look at the consensus big board right now, you have Emeka Egbuka at 23rd, but he seems like he's sliding. He might even come back to Ohio State. And then everyone else is outside of the first round, like outside of the top 32 picks. To me, Keon Coleman and Rome Odunze are near locks to be first rounders this far out, and draft capital matters a ton, so I'm going to put them here because of that. It's so far out that, some of these guys can go round 3, some of them can return back to school. To me, these are 2 locks to go first round. Then we look at kind of how they stack up on receiving yards per team pass attempt. This is why I'm not as high on them, right? Where you can see here, this is Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Nabers, Keon Coleman, Rome Odunze. In terms of receiving yards per team pass attempt, just like where they're at over their every year of their career. And you can just see Marvin Harrison Jr. 2 with those 2 years above 3, and Malik Nabers with that monster year 3. They're both in a class ahead. Now, I will say, Rome Odunze, I usually don't like non-early declares, but we've kind of seen recently with guys like Chris Olave that it's not the end of the world if you come out as a senior. Same thing with like Zay Flowers. So I'm not going to ding him a ton. I would have loved for that year 4 to be, 4+ receiving yards per team passing, but it is tough. I mean, there's a lot of guys in that offense, right? They have McMillan, they have Polk. They got a lot of guys there in terms of like mouths to feed in that passing offense. So it's tough. But he is a really young senior. He's 21 years old. He's going to be 21 years old as a rookie. Or no, he's going to be 21 years old on draft day, Rome Odunze, as a senior. So that's actually really good. He's young. His age-adjusted production actually looks a lot better in terms of these stats, like receiving yards per team pass attempt and all of that. He has good size, 6'3", 215. I will say I do like about Rome Odunze that he had 10 carries, 40 yards, and 2 touchdowns rushing the ball. And he also had 4 kick and punt returns, and he returned 1 of them for a touchdown. So he's very dynamic. Again, I like my comp for him from a number standpoint. I don't, again, breaking down routes and all of that's a little bit too nuanced for me. Maybe we'll have Matt Harmon on at some point this offseason, but Rome Odunze on paper looks a lot like Chris Olave, and I'm trying to teach myself that's a profile we're sort of fine with. It's not the sexiest in the world, but it's not one you need to put way lower than you should. So 107 for me, Rome Odunze. Keon Coleman, this one's tough, man. I mean, year 2, he's below Nabers there. He's above Odunze. Year 3, he's 4th out of all of them. To be fair, he did lose his starting quarterback in his 3rd year, so maybe if Jordan Travis finished things out and he had a college football playoff run, maybe that this number would be a lot better than it is. I will say there are a lot of mouths to feed in that offense. You have Jaheim Bell, you have Johnny Wilson, you have Trey Benson, 3 guys that are going to be NFL guys on that offense. So maybe you can put that into factor. But, I mean, his stat line this year was 50 catches, 658 yards, and 11 touchdowns. So not amazing, but he is a really dynamic athlete. He's like 6'4", 215 pounds. He returns punts. He's also going to be 20 years old on draft day. So he's like super young, super athletic, tons of upside there. But the production and stuff isn't amazing for Keon Coleman. But again, his draft capital where he's locked in at this point, I think 108-ish is like about as low as you could go on him. He's always dripped out. Like he wears 2 mouthpieces sometimes. He wears like a 1 leg sleeve. So I kind of like that in a wide receiver. Now, this is where, again, positional value is going to come into play here. At 109, we have JJ McCarthy. Now, here's the issue. JJ McCarthy could lose in the first round to Bama here and be like, you know what? Run it back. Hit the Blake Corum, go back to school. He could also win the national championship and get drafted top 10 in the NFL. He could still declare after losing to Alabama, and he could go in the second round, right? There's such a wide, like I'm very certain Caleb and May go top 5, Jayden Daniels goes first round at worst. The rest of them, it's a crapshoot. The NFL might prefer Penix, they might prefer Nix. JJ McCarthy would be my pick at QB4 as my 109 with the upside that he could be a top 10 pick. And if he was to go top 12, he would be an elite quarterback prospect in my model. So that's really fun for JJ McCarthy. Now, the fun part about JJ McCarthy is he's super young. He's 20 years old here. You can see he's not going to turn 21 until January 20th. So he's like very young, whereas May and Caleb Williams, I think that they're like 22-ish right now, to sort of put that in perspective. Now, when we look at JJ McCarthy, his numbers aren't going to pop off the page, but he's been very efficient, and he actually has one of the best age 20 QBR seasons in my database. So again, that's the number for, remember we were looking at Caleb Williams, 80 plus 3 years. Well, if we look at just age 20 QBR seasons sorted among drafted QBs since 2007, he's in a really good list here of guys who had 85 plus in their age 20 season. You have Tua, Fields, Bradford, Stroud, Mariota. I think Pat White might be the only guy on this list. Pat White, Dak Prescott are the only guys on this list that didn't get drafted in the first round. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that that's true. Then we have Bryce Young, Lawrence, Deshaun, Manziel, Caleb in his age 20 season, Dak Prescott, Tim Tebow, Lamar Jackson. So, I mean, that's an amazing season to have at age 20 for JJ McCarthy. And I think the interesting part about him as well is he kind of has that, he's in that Mahomes, Stroud, Purdy, Richardson bucket of avoiding pressure, where pressure is deemed personally responsible. He's actually responsible for a lot of them, but his pressure to sack conversions even way lower than Caleb Williams, or his pressure to sack rate is like sub 15%, which is really, really impressive, where he is inviting the pressure, and then he's also avoiding the pressure and making plays. We can make plays out of structure. He had a really good throw where he zipped it behind the guy against Ohio State, but some people will tell you that should have maybe been a pick. He's gutsy. He has some Zach Wilson to him. I was talking with Danny from Fantasy Stock Exchange today. He kind of liked the Zach Wilson, Brock Purdy comp for him, but he's not. It's tough. It's tough to really find the comp for him. It's also tough. A lot of he's a projection, where in the Michigan offense, he's kind of been hidden, unless if they're playing like Minnesota or something. But in these big games, he's kind of been hidden a little bit. Of course, he did have that big game versus Ohio State, but he was kind of a no-show versus Penn State. It's tough to really project what he can be. But again, if he goes top 12, young, really good QBR season, this sack avoidance thing, I think, is one of his best things just in terms of playmaking and avoiding pressure and being smart in the pocket. That's all there for him. Now, somebody that's kind of similar to him is Bo Nix. Bo Nix is in there as well. He's going to be our 110 as our QB5 here, Bo Nix. And you can see he has that same trait where they're both in that, Richardson, Mahomes, Stroud, Purdy area. You can loop in Bryce Young if you'd like to as well, of guys that invite pressure. I wouldn't call it throwing their offensive line under the bus, but sort of in terms of what this chart shows. But then they're also very good at avoiding those sacks. And that's in, I was going to say the Big Ten for JJ McCarthy, so there's a lot of studs there. Pac-12 a little bit different, but they still have some defensive guys. Now, we look at Bo Nix in terms of like EPA on sacks. It's also insane. This is just like sorting by QBR. So Bo Nix had 91 QBR this year, which is elite. That is amazing. That is really, really good. But of this entire list, he is actually, among all quarterbacks qualified on ESPN's QBR, he has the lowest EPA lost on sacks. He has minus 2.3 EPA. EPA is just expected points added, just how much are you hurting your team on an expected points basis. And minus 2.3 is insane. That means he's never really taking negative sacks, never really taking bad sacks. Now, I will say, Oregon's offensive line is really good. Bo Nix has the lowest percent of pressure dropbacks at 15.3%. Only 15.3% of his dropbacks were pressured this year. That is really low. Oregon offensive line is amazing. Now, when we just sort of look at when he's pressured, in that short sample that he's pressured 15.3% of the time, college football numbers here shows that dropback success rate while pressured, so your success rate when pressured, he is way ahead of the curve. He's the only guy above a 40% success rate while pressured. I think success rate is just, like first downs, positive plays, all of that. He's not making mistakes when he's pressured, and that's really exciting. So, again, while the offensive line kind of made it so he didn't have to be good under pressure, he is good under pressure, which is really exciting. Now, pressure to sack rate as well, below 10%. So when he's getting pressured, he's evading that. And when he's evading that, he's making good plays with a high success rate. So that's all really exciting here. And we look at his pressure versus non-pressured stats as well on PFF. He actually has a higher yards per attempt when under pressure, which is just absolutely insane to me. He has a 9.7 yards per attempt when under pressure, 9.4 when kept clean, 6 touchdowns, 1 interception when under pressure. I believe that he was the highest graded quarterback in college football when under pressure, Bo Nix. He kind of reminds me of that Anthony Richardson X factor, but the issue is he's not as physical. In the offensive line, there's a little bit of a loop in there where it's like, how much of this is Oregon versus you. And also, he is a really good rusher. He had 6 rushing touchdowns this year. He had 14 rushing touchdowns last year. Coming out of high school, he was listed as a dual threat quarterback. So he can definitely move a lot more than you would think, Bo Nix. Now, I will say the downside is he's old. 5th-year guy. He's going to be 24 years old in week 1, but again, we talked about it. Not necessarily a death sentence. Again, Joe Burrow came in really old. We've seen guys, I think Burrow is the guy listed. I know Andrew Luck. I know Deshaun was a little bit older. Again, it's something I tested for. It didn't matter a ton, but there is, of course, once you get to like Brandon Whedon area of it being like, okay, like this is just absurd. So I don't know. Take it however you want in terms of Bo Nix's age. Now, after that, we have Xavier Worthy. Now, this last list, late first, these are all guys that are just kind of a jumble of wide receivers here that I sort of want to rip through. But first, we'll talk about Xavier Worthy. He is somebody I really, really, really like, man. Xavier Worthy, look, I don't want to get ahead of our skis here. He is somebody, he has an outside, right now, I'll be honest, I'll take a peek behind the curtain. He is, in the RS grades, he is a gold wide receiver prospect if he went 2nd round. But he has a lot of upside, right? If he goes like 1st round and he crushes the combine, he can be an elite. If he goes like top 10, he crushes the combine, he could be legendary. Xavier Worthy, the spreadsheets absolutely love Xavier Worthy. Now, I will say as well, we've been mentioning the RS grade stuff and everything. If you're like, Ron, what the hell is all this? It's all on the Patreon. This doesn't have the right stuff plugged on it. I got to make one of these graphics for the Dynasty stuff, but I already have my RS prospect grades for the 2024 class are already live on Discord, on the Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. I'll have a link in the description and the comment section down below. As soon as I upload this video as well, I'm going to be making a Dynasty rankings update. So if you are in the Dynasty world and the Dynasty space and you're like, I would love to get some content from Ron for Dynasty, this is where we start to change gears and I start to give love to you guys. So we're going to have that. I'm going to get the Devy grades all together as the combine and other stuff happens and players declare. I'll start beginning, I'll add to my list of players in the RS grades. So I'll start to input things that happen. A lot of exciting stuff going in the Dynasty side of things. So if you're curious about like where these numbers are coming from, the historical grades are all there as well. Everything in terms of RS grade, Dynasty, everything I do, that'll be on patreon.com/Ron Stewart. But you can see here with Xavier Worthy that year 1 is super impressive. As a freshman at Texas, he comes out here and flirts with 3 receiving yards per team pass attempt. Down year 2, where he kind of slips under 2. Downish year 3, but he kind of comes out a little bit better. But that year 1, freshman year, super, super, super solid. He's also really fast. Like, he is insanely, insanely fast. He kind of is a... I don't know what you want to comp him to, because I think Will Fuller is selling him short, but he is like a downfield-ish guy. I think like a Brandon Cooks is probably a good comp as well for him. Now, after that, again, it's just going to be a jumble of wide receivers. We're not going to spend too much time on. 112, you have Mecca Egbuka, huge recruit coming out of high school. Somebody that, I'm just not going to bet against these Ohio State wide receivers. It's kind of that simple. He produced a ton in year 2, down year in year 3, dealing with injury, but that year 2 is enough where that's like borderline what Garrett Wilson did, right? If we look at, let me see these other Ohio State wide receivers that we looked at earlier. Not that one. Yeah, like you can see Garrett Wilson. I mean, Garrett Wilson had a great year 2, but he had a down year 1 and kind of a downish year 3. Not quite as down as a Emeka Egbuka, but it really only takes one standout year at Ohio State for me to be like, okay, you're a guy. He has NFL size. He's like a big. I don't know if I'd call him an X wide receiver, but he's a big physical wide receiver, and he's really fun. Again, I'm just not going to bet against those Ohio State guys, but he is somebody that could 100%. It wouldn't shock me at all if he returned back to school. You have Troy Franklin, who's fun. He almost reminds me of like a better version of Marvin Mims here, where you can see didn't break out as a freshman, just like pretty much solid all around. Flirts with the dotted line in year 2, and then hits the threshold in year 3. Just like a nice linear progression there. Young guy as well. I think that he's gonna be like he might be like 20 on the dot right now. Let me see. Troy Franklin age. Yeah, he's 20 years old. He won't be 21 until February. So younger rookie there. You have Brian Thomas Jr. as well, who came out of nowhere, kind of sucked in year 1, year 2. But then he comes out here in his final year at LSU and balls out there. You can see he's next to Troy Franklin. On top of that, if we look at, do I have the LSU chart on standby here? I do not, but I think I can get it. I think this is it. Nope. It's going to be this one. Yes, you can see, I mean, so his year 3 there compared to, like, it's really not all that far off of, like, Justin Jefferson. I don't think you should compare him to Justin Jefferson, but he's, I would say that he's somewhere between, like, Terrace Marshall and these, like, legendary wide receiver guys from LSU, if that makes sense. I think that he's good. Apparently his frame, like, he's a big size speed guy, which gives me some PTSD from Terrace Marshall, but, yeah, if I look at, like, height, weight, I think it's, like, 6'4". Yeah, 6'4", 205 is what he's clocked in at. So that's, like, a fun archetype. And then we also have the last one. I'll throw in Trevion Henderson. We don't know if he's going to declare or not, but he is somebody that was, like, a 5-star coming out of school. Monstrous, like, such a good freshman season that I thought, like, he was on pace to be a legendary running back prospect. Injuries in year 2. Bounce back year 3 this year. But still hasn't put together, like, his best season was him as a freshman by far. And it seems like he's going to return back to school. But Trevion Henderson, if he doesn't go back to school, would be my RB1 and would flirt as like a late first, early second type of guy. Now, that is going to do it for us today. That is my first crack at a Dynasty rookie mock draft. I hope that you guys enjoyed that video. It's 51 minutes long here, but I think like we packed it with as much info and charts and everything as you possibly could. Again, if you're interested in any of this stuff, my historical RS grades, how my grading works, how the prospect models work, if you just want to pick my brain in the Discord, all of that will be on the Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. And if you can't support there, just leave a like, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold, ice around my body like I'm